Hello, trumpet players. Today, let's take a little bit of time and talk about what it takes to sound like a great trumpet player. So, I believe that even beginner trumpet players, and this is theoretical because I've never seen it, but I think it's possible for a beginner trumpet player to sound as good as one of the best trumpet players in the world. Let's say, for example, that both of them have to play hot cross buns. Is it possible for a beginner trumpet player to play hot cross buns so well that you can't tell the difference between the beginner and a top-notch professional trumpet player? Is that possible? I believe that yes, it's possible. Is it probable? Not likely. Okay? But I want you to start thinking about that. Let's make it a little bit more reasonable. Let's change the scenario now. Let's look at a high school trumpet player versus one of the best in the world. Okay? Whoever you think your favorite trumpet player is, put that person in your head and then put them against a high school trumpet player. Now let's say they're both competing on a written arrangement of Amazing Grace. That's in F. So I think the highest note. Okay, so the highest note is going to be C. High school trumpet player playing only up to C. And the professional is playing the same piece. Now, here's the thing. Could you tell the difference? I want you to think about that. Let's say it's a blind test. Can you hear the difference between a high school trumpet player or a junior high, for that matter, if it only goes up to C, right? Can you hear the difference between a high school trumpet player and a hardcore, heavy-duty professional? If they're both playing that version of Amazing Grace. Think about it. And I'm hoping that you can tell the difference. I'm hoping that you can. Okay? Now I want you to ask yourself a question. What is that difference? Because right there is your answer to the question, how do I sound like a great trumpet player? Because the difference between the way the pro plays it and the way the high school trumpet player plays it has nothing to do with the rhythms. Well, I shouldn't say nothing. There is something to do with the rhythms, but it's not what we mean when we say in high school, play the right rhythm. You could have someone play the right rhythm and still be rhythmically questionable, right? So I don't mean it in that sense. Play the right notes. Play it at the right tempo. Get the right dynamics. Both of them are doing all of that. So what is it that you're hearing that tells you that the professional is better? Think about that. Think about it. Because we're gonna talk a little bit about that. Let me first of all say that I believe how good you are is your choice. You choose how good you're going to play. I believe that the standard you hold yourself to is how well you're going to play. So in the sense of the things that I'm talking about here that make a pro sound different from a typical high school student? Those things are things that you choose not to do. Okay? Those are a choice. Now, let me ask you this. If a student played, a high school student played the high school music at equally as well as the pro so that you couldn't tell the difference, which one of those guys, for example, is going to make All-State? I don't mean between the pro, I mean out of all the high school trumpet players, the one that sounds like a pro, doesn't it make sense that he's the one that's going to make All-State? See, I'm trying to play with your mind here, but I hope it's sinking in. Let's look at what we have here. I think the overall difference between our hypothetical pro and our hypothetical high school students is a difference in control. Okay? A well-trained trumpet player has control that a high school trumpet player hasn't mastered yet. You know, music, art music, I'm talking about art music. Art music is elevated. The way I like to describe it, art music is supernatural, not in a popular sense. I'm not talking about sci-fi. I'm not talking about fantasy. I'm talking about supernatural in its truest sense. It's above what's natural. Great music, great performance, great performers are supernatural. It's over and above what comes natural to the human body. The difference between that hypothetical high school student and the hypothetical professional is that the high school student hasn't mastered that control yet. That superhuman, supernatural control over his own body. The pro has. Okay? So, I like to use as because, the history of art music can be traced back to kings and courts. And I like to use that as an example because, the courts, the image that that's portrayed to us of the courts is a lofty image. They've got the hair, the wigs, they've got the makeup, the way they stand, and like the dudes back then were wearing high heels even, right? Everything was in a sense of being elevated above regular humanity. And that's what art music is. Now there's other, there are contexts where we let that go. But that's because we can. Okay, so there are exceptions. But for the most part, a great trumpet player has those lofty qualities. Okay, let's talk about specifics here. One thing that is natural and is human is to have a variety of sounds on a variety of notes, a variety of tacks on a variety of notes. The pitch can be this way or that way. In great trumpet playing, we have uniformity throughout. So, for example, if you have a line of tongue notes going up a scale, those notes will have they'll have the same articulation, they'll have the same intonation, they'll have the same sound. The characteristics of each note are uniform. Same thing with individual notes. Let's say you're going to hold a long note. It's not going to change pitch in the middle. It's not going to change sound in the middle. So, and how do we get that kind of sound? I'm not going to go into the complete details here, but it has a lot to do with resonance. And what is resonance? And I'm going to do a separate movie on resonance. It's going to be a while, months before I get to that movie, I think. Movie, I just called it a movie. Before I get to that video. But it's an important video. We want to know what resonance is. It has to do with playing in tune, but it has to do with playing in tune with your trumpet, which makes it complicated. But I'm not going into that part of it now. But a great player has a resonant sound. He plays the instrument in a way that the overtones, not the overtones, the vibration that the lips are creating resonates the trumpet, and the trumpet basically does all the work for you. Okay? These are things that just about anybody can do. And it's shocking sometimes the people who don't do them. The people who, so, and here's, I know this goes back to the video I did about the high note trap. A lot of people don't work on these more controlled aspects of what we do, these more elevated aspects, because they can't hear them. They can't tell the difference. That's why I said earlier, I hope you can hear the difference. Because otherwise, you're too blind to the stuff that really matters. Okay? The stuff that matters most on your instrument. Let's go back to Amazing Grace. Oh, here's the other thing that makes a difference. And this almost sounds like it contradicts the whole uniformity thing. But when we express ourselves over and above that uniformity, you have so you're going to add vibrato. So vibrato sounds like it contradicts because vibrato, now you're adding a change in tone. But there's a uniform change in tone, right? So vibrato, it seems to contradict. Same thing with phrasing. You know, you're going to have in what I call intensity arches over the phrase. So that seems to introduce a changing, but you're going to do this arch without changing the attack, without changing the pitch, the intonation. You're going to do it without changing the sound. That's the control. So here's a exaggerated bad version of someone playing Amazing Grace. Okay, that's exaggerated. I exaggerate those kinds of things so that you get it. I want you to hear what I'm talking about. And now, here's the negative part. I wasn't going to leave that out completely, okay? I'm voicing this as what you can do to sound great. But there are people who can play fast and high and haven't mastered these things yet. So I don't have anything against playing fast, nothing against playing high. I do both. I do both professionally. It's not that they're playing high. It's not that they're playing fast. The problem is that they sound horrible. Okay? And the only reason I'm talking about that is so that you understand that there's a difference. If you were to take some of these guys that play fast and high and put it back in that scenario that we had earlier, the hypothetical fast and high guy now against the successful pro, there's a clear difference. If you put that person on Amazing Grace and then listen in a blind test, Listen to this person's amazing grace and listen to this professional player's amazing grace. I don't care. You know what? If you can't play it with these qualities in this octave, I don't care if you can play it in the other octave, because there's no way you can do that kind of quality in the upper octave if you can't do it down here already. Okay? So that's why it was such a negative video before. Okay? Because I made it all about, I didn't want to sound like I was putting down high note players. That's not what this is about. This is about helping elevate you, my listener, the person visiting this website now. This is about elevating you and trying to steer you away from that thinking that says, if I can play high and fast, then I must be pretty good. If you can play high and fast, all that means is you can play high and fast. There is not a lot of value to that. There's no value to a trumpet player that plays high and fast but can't hold a steady tone, that has no sense of uniformity in articulation, no sense of uniformity in sound, no sense of uniformity in phrasing or any of that stuff. Don't be swooned by the false intellect of someone who's caught in the high note trap. All right? If you haven't seen the video about the high note trap, you can click here. It'll be there. Okay? But yes, I want you to think about that. Take yourself back to that person, to that scenario. It is possible for a high school student to sound as good as a pro, a fantastic, top-notch professional. It's possible for a high school student to play Amazing Grace in that key just as well as one of the world's top professional trumpet players. Think about that. And it's not because they play high, it's not because they play fast. It's because of this element of control that can only be learned through mastering your own body. All right? That's what I have for you today. I hope you let this sink in, because this is very, very, very important. All right? God bless you, and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you very much.